Hi, this is Tamsen Granger.
This is Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan Read the Paper. It's Sunday, July 8th. Okay, and the weather is fabulous here in Limeport.
Great weekend.
And we're anxious to talk about all kinds of things. Bikes, Marvel?
Yes.
Soccer, the Earth's orbit, songs by various people. So here we go.
Well, we're energized by the weather.
Without delay.
Without delay. So we're thinking about being outdoors, and the Times has an article, which was very interesting, I thought. It's about glamping, and glamping has always been a word with somewhat negative connotations. It's really a mashup of glamour and camping. It's camping done a little bit more nicely, and the serious campers sneer at this. But the Times makes a good case for a reevaluation, and that is camping where you're not quite roughing it on the borders of New York City. So it gives an example, glamping on Governor's Island, where following a concert, a family settles down in two very, very nice tents that have been put together, not by them. They're semi-permanent structures. There's no sleeping bags. They're sleeping in beds. They come from Park Slope, this family of four. They took a ferry ride that was 8 minutes, and they stay all night out there, and they're looking at the tremendous view of the city. They're looking at the stars. They're communing with nature, and it sounds pretty good. And
how much nature is on Governor's Island?
Well, that's a fair question, but that's just the beginning of the article, right? So Governor's Island apparently has a fair bit of nature, but there are other areas to camp on the outskirts of New York that are being developed. Apparently in the country, camping is enjoying something of a renaissance.
You mean like the country?
USA, 2.6 million people camped this past year who had never camped before.
Okay. And
the camping around here is being stirred by groups that are Uber-like organizations. There's one which is called Tenter, and they look for locations like farmers' fields which are not being used. They make an arrangement with the farmer. They set up a very nice campsite, a camp that's equipped with a durable canvas tent on a raised platform, memory foam mattress, Brazilian hardwood table, etc., etc. Average $144 a night.
Well, that sounds moderately expensive.
Well, it's not.
Hence the word glamping.
Glamping, I agree with that.
But the etc., does that include facilities?
The facilities are common facilities, generally speaking, but that's not so awful. And there are exemplars of this throughout the New York region, and all these startups are doing this kind of thing. There's one in Rockaway. There's another by the Hudson.
So Rockaway would seem to be a beach thing.
I don't know. They don't give that kind of detail.
Well, you've really not done your research, have you, here?
I'm reading the Times. It's near Fort Tilden. It goes for about $200 a night. And they say in that particular one, we're taking the glam out of glamping. That one's a little more basic. But even so, no sleeping bags.
So you think this is good because it gets people outside? The
whole point is, and I can't come, they have 6 or 7 examples here of startups in different locations. And the prices range from $49 to $800, depending on what you sign up for.
Whoa.
Well, $800 takes us back to Governor's Island. But the point is that, think about this. It's what they're selling is the notion that you do get away from it all. You have almost like a completely different environment, completely apart from the environment you're normally in. You are there in nature. You are there in the stars. You are there by a communal campfire generally, or your own fire pit. You are shut away from the normal stimulation you have, like the cell phones like, and you might be with your family too, and maybe that puts a different spin on everything. There's a lot there to look at. And finally, they make the point, they say, we're trying to get a lot of local people camping. One woman said to me, it's my first time, so if it doesn't work out, I'm going home tonight. He smiled and shrugged and said, you know something? You can't do that at Yosemite. So, yeah. You sort of dip your toe in.
All right, so it's local camping.
Local camping with
local
with
glamorous.
Not much investment. Yes, but that strikes me as an interesting way to spend the weekend or a Saturday night.
All right.
So I could see it. I mean, we do that when we go to our weekend house. We forget our normal cares and we're out there by nature, and it's the same idea.
Okay, sort of, yes. Okay.
All right.
All right, interesting.
Yes.
I don't see you camping, but...
But it's glamping. You can see me glamping.
All right. All right.
So the other thing that's been going on that we turn to, because you can't escape, is the World Cup. And we're not big World Cup fanatics by any means, but there was an article in the Journal about the fact that the World Cup caused a big problem in England this weekend because England played a match in the morning. Well, I guess for them it was the afternoon, Saturday afternoon, just yesterday, a match they happened to win. But the point is...
July 7th.
July 7th, which is the date...
Saturday, July 7th.
Exactly.
Which apparently is...
The day of more weddings are scheduled in the UK than any other day of the year.
Well, a lot of weddings are scheduled around here, actually, too.
Okay. Well, then it's no surprise.
So I wonder if they had similar issues.
Well, the issue is this, right? The issue is that, you're supposed to be at the wedding, but you want to watch the soccer game, honestly. And more to the point... people want to pay attention to the soccer game during the wedding ceremony. And the Church of England, no less an institution, the Church of England, made a pronouncement that when folks go to weddings on that Saturday, July 7th, they are not to bring their cell phones to monitor the games, because that's bad behavior.
In the church?
In the church. Church of England.
Okay.
So it was a serious... We've had that issue before. We've been invited to parties where I had to watch basketball games. But
you never did it in the synagogue or in the church.
Well, we didn't have the technology, but...
I think the Church of England is just telling you what you got to do in church.
Well, maybe, but I tell you the truth, I have been in a synagogue where other people have had their cell phones on monitoring Mets score. Now, this tells you it was a few years ago, because the Mets haven't done anything relevant for years. But...
haven't done anything worth... surreptitious looking up.
Exactly. Yeah. And to the extent that there was praying on their behalf, that didn't work, obviously. So it's not a sort of a sad ending. In any event, in the U.S., the story is that LeBron James is signing with the Los Angeles Lakers. And the Times was kind enough to remind us of the 3 or 4 times in the past where the biggest star in basketball has signed with the Los Angeles Lakers. And often in stories like this, you half expect to see, well, and that seemed like a good idea, but it didn't work out. No, not the case. It works out every single time. Because what you have is a situation where Kareem Abdul-Jabbar went to the Lakers and won championships. Wilt Chamberlain went to the Lakers and won championships. Shaquille O'Neal went to the Lakers and won championships. The Lakers really benefit from this kind of thing. And why does it happen? It turns out that when people become superstar basketball players, the folks that they become friendly with and want to hang out with are Hollywood stars, recording artists, people like that.
People in LA. But here's the thing. But somebody's got to hire them. Who's figuring out to hire those guys?
Oh, no, anybody would hire LeBron
Anybody
James.
would hire them?
LeBron James. I mean, there's no question. It was a bidding war for LeBron James.
Right.
But there's a maximum salary you're allowed to pay, so it goes way past money.
Oh, okay.
And it goes way past money. So then it's the question, where
does he want to go? And so the celebrities lure them there.
Well, in
the
part,
lifestyle lures them there.
Let me put it this way. LeBron James already has a home in L.A.
Okay.
Has no connection with L.A.
And you think it'll work.
And his wife likes L.A.
Just because it always works.
His wife likes L.A. That's all you need to know. Yeah, it'll work.
Happy wife, happy life.
Exactly. And will the team be successful? It will. Will it be champion? Stay tuned. I kind of think not. But if anyone can do it, it's LeBron James. So we'll see. They have an advantage out there. It's the sunshine.
All right. Very good. So there's an article in the New York Times this week about a new era for bike share heading to New York City. And that is, we know city bikes are super popular in New York City. They've been breaking all kinds of records, even this year. 80,000 trips one day in June on city bikes.
Yeah.
And but the next big development would be dockless bike share.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. City bikes have their docks, and you hear about them a little bit because they're kind of always in the way of various businesses, etc. But a dockless bike share trial has been authorized in the Bronx and Staten Island. Okay, so not in Manhattan yet. Manhattan is still specifically only docks. City bikes with docks.
With docks.
Okay, they've got the authorization for that through like 2029.
Right, and dockless means you can leave the bike anywhere.
Right. You just, you unlock the bike with an app and then you leave it where you need it. And, you wouldn't think that quite works. Like, wouldn't there be bikes lying around in, kind of lame locations? But apparently, so far, it works pretty well.
Really?
In, the various trials. So, that's kind of interesting. The other thing they're authorizing is electric e-bikes.
Right.
Dockless e-bikes. So that should make a difference as well, because that will really enable all kinds of people to utilize bikes, no matter what their level of fitness is.
Yeah, I think that's could get crazy. I mean, I know you just said it was not in Manhattan, and I understand it's not in Manhattan yet, but whatever starts in the boroughs, if it works, it's going to be in Manhattan.
So what's interesting is that Jump is the company.
Yeah.
That has these provides these dockless bikes.
Yeah.
And Uber just bought Jump.
Right.
Okay. Lyft is buying City Bike.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God! So it's going to be an Uber Lyft situation.
Or is buying the core operations of Motivate, the parent company that runs City Bike.
Right. Yeah.
So. These things are getting interesting.
Yeah.
These,
Well, look, I can just, God, we just came back from Amsterdam and Brussels and places like that.
Well, Amsterdam's totally overrun by bikes.
Overrun by
bikes. It
bicycles.
has 700,000 people, and there are approximately 1 million bikes. And people talk about dockless biking.
Yeah.
People just sometimes randomly take bikes, and when they're done with them, throw them in the canal.
Right.
And so the city spends a fair amount of money dredging the canals of bikes. And also they have a lot of issues sort of authorizing where you can park your bikes legally, and they will take your bike and impound it if it's in an illegal parking location.
Look, it's going to be chaos, and you do that with electric, and you have electric bikes besides. We were obviously tourists in Amsterdam and places like that, but you feared for your life. I mean, you would have to be super careful when you cross the street. You have to have your head on a swivel. They're flying around. They do control it a little bit because they have their own stoplights with little bike insignia on them, which is we're not set up to have in New York.
Well, as it stands now, driving in Manhattan is a little bit dicey around the bikes.
Yeah.
Okay. You have messenger bikes, and those guys will do anything. Yeah. Okay. Plus, you have the city bikes, which you have good bikers, but you also have oblivious tourists who don't know where they're going and aren't necessarily skilled cyclists.
Right.
And I've had some close calls as a driver, but on the other hand, New York City's trying to get rid of drivers, trying to get rid of cars.
Yeah, but I'm thinking pedestrians. Imagine what you said a moment ago about the delivery guys can be out of control, or the amateur bikers aren't totally in control. What about an amateur biker with an e-bike? I mean, talk about losing control of your vehicle.
So we shall see. Economically, it's interesting.
I'm sticking with the subway. I mean, it's
a lot of different aspects.
All right.
I'm going to make this.
I don't have anything that's that hair-raising in terms of transportation. I did note that Amazon continues to impress. They now have door-to-door delivery to the Himalayas, to near Tibet, to a place called Leh, India. Why? Because they have a new partner called Incredible Himalaya, which will take your package from the central delivery point, let's call it a postal office type operation, and bring it to your doorstep, which means that if you are in a remote location in the Himalayas, you just get online and you order those disposable diapers, and they will be delivered to your door in 5 days, which is mind-boggling.
Okay, so Uber's unstoppable. Amazon is unstoppable.
Right.
I'm telling you.
Well, Amazon, they said, how can this be profitable? They say, we may not make that money in Leh, India, but, the big cities in India, we make a ton of money. So to be able to say we deliver everywhere, it's worth it. So they're doing it. But you have the solution, right?
Well, interestingly enough, Kansas City Mo now has a streetcar.
Yeah.
And, there's an article in the travel section in the New York Times today about just how desolate downtown Kansas City was, let's say 15 years ago. And, part of now it's coming back to life. And one thing that's helping is a streetcar line. Now, I've been ambivalent about streetcars. We've actually ridden some streetcars recently. We had, really helped us get around Portland,
right, it's great.
Oregon when we visited, and we enjoyed it. De Blasio is trying to promote the use of streetcars in the various boroughs. But we've also heard that in many places where they've instituted streetcars, no one uses it. It's not fast enough or reliable enough or economical enough to commute on. And so they've been shunned. The streetcar in Kansas City is a huge success. In the first year, they had a hopeful estimate of about 1 million people using it. They had 2 million.
Wow.
And it has really revived the areas that are along the streetcar. It goes from the old Union Station, one of those glorious buildings that was even closed for a while, one of those glorious railroad station buildings that is now in use again. And it goes up to the old Western Union building and something called River Market that has food, restaurants, farmers market, all kinds of stuff. And along the way, there are various neighborhoods, artistic neighborhoods, different neighborhoods that have been revitalized by it. And guess what? It's free. It's free. It is paid for by a special assessment on the business owners. And the business owners are seeing success from that, okay? Sales tax revenues to Kansas City went up by 54% in that area recently. So anybody can use it, and people, it's easy to use, it's free to use, and it's being successful. So that's kind of interesting and exciting in terms of city infrastructure and how to revitalize the city.
I hear you talk about that. Why wouldn't you have free streetcars in New York City? I mean, that could really change the city. Matter of fact, might just make it free buses in New York City. But isn't that the answer? I mean, the impossible traffic, the impossible, movement in the city, and everything's a disaster. Just get people on buses and just say it's free. It's not a big deal. It's not a huge investment. Just hop on and give it a shot. Wouldn't the city run better?
All right, you heard it here first.
All right, well,
from your mouth to God's
I
ears.
think free. There's a lot too free. It's not worth it. It's not worth collecting the $2 every trip. Just get everybody on the mass transit vehicles. Just get them on it and stop with this.
Nickel and diming.
Well, yeah, nickel and diming, and the cars and everything would just choke the city to death. All right, that's my position.
Speaking of positions.
Yes, it was. Well, look, speaking of positions, we're not going there exactly. Where we're going is the Earth's orbit, where we've gone before.
The Earth's position
in the orbit.
Yeah,
right.
In the cosmos.
In the cosmos. So it's been a beautiful weekend this weekend, but last weekend was super hot. And you may have said to yourself, "Gee, it's so hot. It's it feels like
can't get any hotter than this.
Can't get any hotter. The conditions are the worst there's ever been. It's never been this hot." Well, you couldn't be more wrong, because in fact, what's going on right now in terms of the Earth's position as a planet is it is at its farthest point that it will be all year from the sun. How does that work? The Earth, of course, revolves around the sun, but it is not a circular orbit. It is an ellipsis, which means that there are certain points of the year that the outermost point is an additional 3 million miles from the sun, from the closest point. And the day that it is the 3 million miles from the sun is known as aphelion. And we are in that period right now. We are never this far from the sun. So it's
so if we were somewhere else in our orbit, it would be even hotter. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, you can't put it all together. We're lucky.
We're lucky.
It could be
July.
worse. It could be worse. Well, 3 million miles in the grand scheme of things is not as big as it sounds. But the point is made in the article in the Times that the Earth has it pretty good. that if you were on Mars or on Pluto, or as the Earth puts it, it's different for people who are Martians or Plutonians, because there's a common misconception apparently among people on the Earth that the seasons have something to do with how far we are from the sun. That's not true. That's not true. It's about the tilt of the Earth. But it would be true if you were on Mars. School children on Mars, according to David Grinspoon, an astrobiologist, will need to be taught differently about the reasons for the seasons. So the school children on Mars have another thing coming. Because, in fact, there it does make quite a difference. When you're at aphelion in Mars, you're 31% farther from the sun, which is an enormous percentage compared to the very minor 7% difference that you have.
So the Martian children need to bundle up during that season.
Yes, and in fact, the Plutonians, according to Richard Binzel, an astronomer at MIT, have it even worse. It's super freezing because they're even farther, because their ellipsis has a more extreme shape. So it's we can manage it. And for those of you...
But let me ask you one question.
Yes.
Where does Kyrie Irving come out on this?
That's funny. I don't know. They don't quote Kyrie Irving. This is inadequate reporting on the part of the Times.
I'm thinking if he has a idea about the Earth being flat, maybe he has an idea about the ellipsis as well.
He probably has an idea about people on Pluto, how they feel about this. I don't know. We'll have to check into Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving, of course, the astronomer in waiting in the National Basketball Association.
Philosopher, more.
Philosopher, yes, I guess so. Yes. And speaking of philosophy, there are only more 5 different articles over the past week about superhero movies, because it just comes up almost every day because people make the observation in different contexts about the fact that Hollywood, the movies, are dominated by these superhero stories, by these comic books. And most
does that bother people? Is that like signs of the apocalypse?
I don't know if it bothers people. It bothers some people. Most people don't notice it. They just say, well, these are high-grossing movies. That's cool. And a lot of people just go to the movies.
Keep them coming.
Yeah, and don't think about it. I mean, no one's getting hurt. They're selling a lot of tickets. It's a popcorn thing. It gets you out of the hot weather when it's a hot day. But according to an article by a fellow named Mark Bowden, who's a journalist who writes in the Times, it's somewhat unsatisfying. And he's writing about his own experience as a 12-year-old who was so taken by the superhero comics, as some of us were, that he and a friend of his, with their chemistry sets, put together some potion that they exposed each other to. They thought would give each other superheroes, and they were disappointed. Superpowers. They were disappointed. And it didn't really work. But they were...
Did it do any damage to the house?
They don't mention that. But they say, it's kind of weird. The stories, how engaging can they be really? I mean, normal humans in these movies are mere bystanders. They're just at risk of being crushed or vaporized. The average person's powerless and depends for survival on the goodwill of the gods, which are the superheroes. And, the obvious comparison between, mythology and the gods of mythology and the superheroes is, how far can you take this? I mean, he does draw the comparison between Spider-Man, for example, which he compares to the Icarus story, Spider-Man flying too high to the sun, and being disciplined for that reason, Wonder Woman, which he compares to Paradise Lost. But he feels that they don't follow through, and the stories are ultimately meaningless. And this is quoting him here. He says, the biggest reason for Hollywood's booming comic book age is technology. Computer imagery can now bring even the most outlandish images of comic book fantasy to life. They are exactly what I dreamed about as a boy. I watch now with my discounted senior citizen ticket, ever hopeful of recapturing the thrill I once got from the static printed page. And despite the astonishing cinematic wizardry, I am always disappointed. The stories I read as a boy were no better and generally worse than those now on screen, but my dreams have changed. Yeah.
Do you feel that way when you see it? Do you
Yes.
You're disappointed.
Yeah.
You're always disappointed.
I'm totally not into these movies. And I find them totally not interesting. And as a kid, I read Marvel Comics. I was totally into it. What does this mean? It means I'm not 12 years old, which is perfectly fine. Except the odd thing is, and maybe this is all because of the market and demographics or whatever, that the movies are dominated by movies for really 12-year-olds, honestly. And there's enough in it for other folks, I guess. And this is a gross generalization. But that's who the target audience is. No matter how you dress it up, that's who the target audience is. I think, there's an obituary here of a fellow named Steve Ditko, who is identified as the comic book artist behind Spider-Man. He's dead at 90. And he was pretty much the first artist to be given the assignment of drawing Spider-Man. When he was back working for Marvel Comics, he developed Spider-Man's personality. And Spider-Man became a big hit. And then he tried to make Spider-Man more realistic. And Spider-Man is considered one of the more realistic of the superheroes. He's a teenager with angst about X and Y. And then he went on beyond that. And that's when he was not successful. So this fellow Ditko became into Ayn Rand as a philosopher.
Right.
And he started actually developing comic book characters based on Ayn Rand's libertarian philosophy. And that wasn't popular. I mean, he had a character named...
Aren't her characters already kind of comic book...
I don't know. He had a character named Mr. A, which is A is for Atlas Shrugged, who believed that there was one unassailable truth and one reality. Unlike mainstream superheroes, he killed criminals. He had a character who was whose face was a question mark, who spoke in sort of stilted vernacular, stilted didactic akin to a philosophical tract. And basically, he became not a very popular comic book artist.
Why would it be popular?
Who
wants to grow up to be that?
All right, I'm not really advocating that, but what I'm saying is
fantasies. It's got to do something to live out your fantasies.
Well,
being able to fly or have incredible powers, right.
But he wanted to take it to the next level. He was trying to connect it to something in real life, and he may have been ill-equipped to do that. But he was considered, a comic book superstar. They even talk about the fact that when he became a recluse, he was very disappointed with all this failure. He wouldn't talk to anyone, and finally he granted an interview with, we were talking before, Neil Gaiman. Is that the right pronunciation?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he wrote Sandman, so, I mean, he's a...
But he's also a very well-recognized author, very respected.
As a novelist, but he's also, a graphic novel.
And he's also into Norse mythology, so you have the connection with mythology one more time. I mean, it's something, it has sort of the mythological dimension. It has the heroic dimension, and it draws people in. But does it have the same heft as mythology? Didn't mythology kind of go somewhere?
This is getting too deep for my pea brain,
yeah.
But, I don't know. It's something to think about.
Yeah.
But clearly it resonates. Clearly these themes, these ideas, these computer-generated images resonate with many folks.
It does.
Okay? Why it's not appealing to some of the cranky old men, I know that's an interesting question.
I don't know.
But I never would have thought Rand characters would be.
All right, I'm not really pushing the Rand characters, although I will just make one final observation on that, and that is Brad Bird, the fellow who wrote The Incredibles, actually was influenced by Ayn Rand when he wrote The Incredibles, and talks openly about that. So there's still some connection. But put that aside for just a moment. I'll just close this whole discussion on one point.
Duly noted.
Yeah, Paul Rudd, who we saw in The Catcher Was a Spy, is also the hero of and the main actor in Ant-Man and Wasp. I think that's the name of that movie. Which we might see.
That's a little dismissive, Daniel.
No,
it's actually gotten some good reviews.
We might see it.
I may go see it.
I didn't say we wouldn't see it.
You don't have to go see it.
But here's my point, and this is pro Paul Rudd, who I've never been a Paul Rudd fan. But he was asked a question in an interview about him being a superhero. He said, well, what do you feel about being a superhero, or do you prefer the term action figure? And he responded, I'm a superhero in fake life. I call myself an action figure in real life. which is...
I'm not sure I really understand that.
Well, because the real action's in real life. And that's where you take acts that matter. The superhero stuff is all fantasy, but that's not really news. All right. So we were going to talk about...
Yeah, on a completely different note. Yeah, the Wall Street Journal, on the back page of the review section, often has a piece about a masterpiece. This week it was written by Willard Spiegelman, and it was about a series of poems by William Wordsworth called the Lucy Poems. And this excited me tremendously.
Right.
Because as a young high school student, I was absolutely in love with the Lucy Poems. So much so that I put them to music.
Yeah.
And me and my madrigal friends would run around, I think like on Keats' birthday. I understand Keats is different, but we actually ran around in the streets singing my songs.
This rivals my Marvel comic obsession.
So this is just how ridiculous I was as a teenage girl.
Okay.
Interesting. I would strum the chords on my ukulele.
Oh God.
But anyway, so they still are wonderful and resonate. Let me read a few stanzas. She dwelt among untrodden ways, beside the springs of Dove, a maid whom there were none to praise, and very few to love. A violet by a mossy stone, half hidden from the eye, fair as a star, when only one is shining in the sky. The refrain goes like this. She lived unknown, and few could know when Lucy ceased to be, but she is in her grave, and, oh, the difference to me. Anyway, it's a very nice little article, discussion of the simplicity and the beauty of this poem, and Spiegelman sums it up by talking about that, oh, the difference to me. The lack of stated feeling, rather than wallowing in it, makes the poet's decision not to mourn a greater proof of grief than any grander articulation. A hushed intake of breath at the end of line 11, a sighing oh of wonder and acceptance, says more than an outpouring, which will always fail. And that seems to me quite beautiful in this day and age of massive outpouring.
Right.
The restrained sort of hint of emotion there is quite evocative. So there you have it. William Wordsworth, the Lucy Poems.
All right. Well, as we've discussed before, we have benefited from your Wordsworth obsession before, where you helped me do a parody of a Wordsworth poem for Symphony Space for a benefit years ago. I don't know if that...
Right.
Yes, from The World is Too Much With Us.
The world is too much with us.
What was the real poem? The world is
Getting
too much...
and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon.
Right. So we changed that to, for Symphony Space, which had famous events called Wall-to-Wall Bach or Wall-to-Wall Beethoven. The poem became The Space is Too Much With Us, Wall-to-Wall, Bach to Bach, the little we see on the books that is black, referring, of course, to financial trouble. So it was pretty funny, actually.
So hats off to Wordsworth this week.
Well, from Wordsworth we go not too far, I don't think, to Irving Berlin. Irving Berlin, the great songwriter, wrote, among a zillion other songs, God Bless America. And there's an interesting article around July 4th about God Bless America, which Wordsworth wrote.
Wordsworth wrote?
Not
no.
Wordsworth. Oh, I'm sorry. Berlin wrote in the early 1920s.
A lot of people are rolling in their graves now.
I'm sorry. Okay. He wrote it for a GI show. He was in the Army following World War I. And Yip Yip Yank was something like the name of the show. It didn't make its way into the show, but 20 years later, God Bless America was a song that he gave to Kate Smith to sing. She made it her own. She made it quite famous. And it was interesting, the different feelings it evoked. And maybe that's the story here, because people put whatever gloss on it they want. So when she was singing in the late 30s...
Kate Smith. Tell the younger members of our audience who Kate Smith was.
Kate Smith was this somewhat substantial woman with a big...
Substantial is putting it mildly.
With a big booming voice.
And what we would call in the DAR an 8-orchid bosom.
Okay. And she had
that means you could have about 8 orchids on your corsage, and it would be supported quite well.
And when she belted out "God Bless America," from the mountains, you knew what she was talking about. And
you did.
Yeah, and it became a signature song for her. Later in her career, she would sing it during critical hockey games for the Philadelphia Flyers. Whenever they needed to win a game, they would fly in Kate Smith wherever she was, and she would appear on the ice in Philadelphia.
I didn't realize that. I know they played it. I thought they played it.
Whenever they had a game 7, a deciding 7 in the playoffs, who would appear on the ice? This woman would sort of very precariously slide along the ice and get in front of a microphone, and she would sing "God Bless America."
That must have been a sight.
The Philadelphia Spectrum would go crazy.
So what's the big deal with it now?
Well, here's the thing. So it is whatever people want to make it. I mean, it's clear what Berlin meant. Berlin was, an immigrant. His family came from Russia in 1897. He wrote the song because his mother, even though times were tough all the time for them, would every once in a while pause in her labors and say, "God bless America." And that's why he wrote the song. Well, when Kate Smith started singing in the late 30s, on the one hand, it became popular, but on the one hand, the Nazis, who were getting ready to initiate World War II, mocked it. And especially because it was written by a Jew, frankly. And on the other hand, Woody Guthrie, who was leftist communist leaning, although, I'm not criticizing him for that. He just felt that the American worker was getting a bad deal. He mocked it also because he said, America's not so great. The real people aren't getting a square deal. And he he wrote a song which was mocked it and put the words "God Bless America" in it. Later, he changed the words, "This land is your land," and that became that famous song. So people have always put different meanings on it. Yeah, different spin on it. And apparently, and I'm frankly, I was unaware of this, but apparently "God Bless America" in many people's eyes now, in the last few years, has become a song associated with conservative political leanings. That it means we should preserve the status quo. And that those folks who are riled up about things and don't feel that the status quo is fair or favorable are against the song, which seems like we've come full circle. It seems quite odd. But, it is what it is. It just shows that any piece of art can take on whatever meaning people seek to impose on it, whatever interpretation seems right in the current circumstances. But it's not what Berlin was all about. So it's just kind of a weird thing.
So that's what we have this week.
No,
we have more.
No, one final note. It's National Ice Cream Month. Okay, now you might think
every month in our house is Ice Cream Month
because we have Tamsen makes artisanal ice cream, her own ice cream, and it's fantastic. And it's hard to eat any other ice cream except Tamsen's ice cream. And I say we should open up a business. And as Tamsen tell me, we would lose money like crazy. That's right. We'd be charging $50 a pint. Although the ice cream this week
was very good. Yes. It was, what was it? It was cardamom, mocha, almond, chocolate stracciatella. It was pretty good. Pretty tasty. Yeah. And I think it will cure everything.
$50 a pint. Yeah. You just give us a call. But apparently it is National Ice Cream Month, but sometimes you hear about these months, the dental month, it's whatever it is. It's some weird thing. Cell phone courtesy month. And you say...
It's Eat Some Popcorn Day. Yeah. And you wonder how does it come about?
And you say, boy, the government does that, the state government, the federal government. It turns out it's not the government. It turns out the government subcontracted, in a sense, that job to something called Chase's Calendar of Events.
Yeah.
Which is a private organization, which you know all about.
I've known all about this. Linda McClellan turned me on to this back in the days of the Cranberry Food Sampler. And whenever we were trying to invent some kind of promotion, we would go to this big book and look up the date, the whatever week it was in mid-April, and say, it's such and such day, and base our promotion or our sale on that. But it was our Bible.
But so it's this private organization is making these holidays, if you will. they're official, which is kind of nutty. But it also means that you can make your own holiday as long as you submit it to the Chase folks and they put it on their calendar of events. And they'll look at it. It's not like they don't have criteria. They want to know, what it comes from, what the purpose is, who pays attention to it, is it getting traction, has it been around for a couple of years?
Do you need to pay for that? Do you have to pay for that?
There's nothing in this article about money changing hands. That's not what it's about. Chase wants to have the important holidays in their events book.
Of course, the significance can get drowned out because there's just so many things being celebrated on every single day.
And yet, it would be a step forward if you had a holiday in mind to get it listed in the Chase book. Because even though it's surrounded by a lot of other holidays, it's something.
The weatherman on Channel 3 will say, nobody watches the weatherman anymore.
The point is,
but maybe
you'll be on the map.
I guess it must be posted on social media.
So think about it, folks. Think about the holidays that you'd like to see commemorated, and see if you can get a little traction for it in social media, whatever. And then dial Chase.
I'm busy already celebrating all the holidays there are.
Oh.
And on that note, I'm going to go have some ice cream. So this is Tamsen Granger.
And Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan, read the paper. See you next week.
Thanks.